Hello everyone, this is Lama Rigse, Koncho Namdo, and I wanted to say something useful. I wanted to do some small teaching on Buddha Dharma in a way which I feel is accessible and helpful to people. And so I wanted to talk about the four immeasurables, which in my mind is the most essential teaching for anyone who wishes to approach Buddhism or wishes to approach personal happiness using a Buddhist lens. So the four immeasurables are immeasurable joy, immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, and immeasurable equanimity. So these are four infinite powers, expansive powers. How they manifest in you or in human beings is limited by various factors, which people might refer to as karma or obstacles or whatnot. It's not particularly important. The notion of the immeasurable bit is that even if these things are limited within you, they don't have to be. They can expand and become greater, and that happens through familiarity, which is sometimes referred to as meditation. It doesn't have to be meditation in anyone's eyes in particular. It's just the building of a habit and the flexing of your mental muscles or your emotional muscles. And this will be the first time I've ever mentioned publicly that I am trained in the tarot from a very special order, and I'm the lineage holder for that order, which is called the Path of Taweret. Taweret is an Egyptian god related to Hathor, and in this tradition, the tarot is known as a picture book, essentially. It's a religious text composed only of pictures, so that it is so simple that someone who is illiterate or a child could understand it. So I hope that's a brief enough explanation as to why I'm going to show you tarot cards. But this is about Buddhism, and I will try and keep it that way. So the four immeasurables, we can split them into two groups. So there is love and joy, and these are the feelings of exaltation. They are the lifting feelings. And then there is compassion and equanimity, and they are the sinking and grounding feelings. So there is an upward thrust, what perhaps the Taoists would call the yang energy, and there is a downward thrust, which is perhaps Taoists would call the yin energy. So these concepts are less emphasized in Buddhism. They are present, but they have complicated Sanskrit names and are typically referred to in much more secretive teachings. The Qigong system in Taoism is very public. What would be considered in Qigong in Tibet is very private, extremely private. I don't even think I want to mention the names of those practices. So, the typical prayer goes something like this, and this is the version I inherited from my Drikung Kagyu Lama, and it's may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all sentient beings never be separated from the sacred joy, which is free from sorrow. May all sentient beings rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. That's the 4 immeasurable prayer. There's also a 5 immeasurable prayer, and also in my lineage there is sometimes a 6th immeasurable prayer. But for now we will stick with the 4. And the 4 immeasurables are meant to expand the capacity for happiness. That is the function of all 4 of them. Longchenpa mentions in Kindly Bhante Isas that equanimity is the most important of the 4 because it causes us to view everything as open, spacious, and collectively. So we're not picking out one group and wishing for their happiness and excluding another, and that the energy or the emotion, which is oftentimes all anyone means by energy, is just emotional charge, emotional power. And we'll talk a lot more about that later, because there's, when Buddhists talk about energy, it's really something very specific, elementary, direct, and observable. It's not something mystic in general. There are mystic qualities, there are stories of superpowers, as there are in all religions, and I personally have faith in these, but it's not required at all for anyone to have faith in these. The religion functions without faith in these sort of ideas. Immeasurable love. Now, before I say that, let's look at it this way. It's as if we had an instrument. Now, instrument is a heart, and it has 4 notes. It has 4 strings that we can pluck, and those are love, joy, compassion, equanimity. These are sort of 4 emotional modes, or 4 mental postures. They also are physical postures, and I may elaborate on that or not. I definitely will talk about it later in another video if I don't. It's already 8 minutes. I'm very sorry. I'm long-winded, and I really desperately try and get to the point as quickly as possible, but it's a struggle. When you say, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, you are meant to envision all sentient beings, whether that's just imagining that you are connecting to them in some abstract way, or you are directly visualizing a limitless crowd of beings, or just thinking this is touching everyone somehow. Whatever it is, you're meant to collectively wish that all living things feel the love that you are feeling. So the love has to come from your own heart. You have to think, all sentient beings have happiness, the cause of happiness, and you have to feel what it feels to love. And then the reason that this is potent, the reason this is powerful, and the reason this is useful is because you allow that to expand and shine outward and touch others. And what that does is it increases your body's capacity to feel love. Okay? Aside from anything else mystical, functionally, you are increasing your body's ability to feel love by straining to make the love that you feel bigger. Now, if you can't even do that, it's perfectly appropriate for you to just mumble, recite, repeat those words. May all sentient beings have happiness, the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from sorrow, the cause of sorrow. May all sentient beings never be separate from the sacred joy, just free from sorrow. May all sentient beings rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all sentient beings have happiness, the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from sorrow, the cause of sorrow. May all sentient beings never be separated from the sacred joy, just free from sorrow. May all sentient beings rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. If you do that enough times, your heart will get the message. You will begin to feel something. So please don't feel, if you don't have that sort of control of yourself, or you don't have that ability to feel love, that you're not going to be able to do it. In fact, that's absolutely the best thing you can do, is to recite that prayer over and over and over again. And eventually, yes, it will cause a emotional change in you. And it would be, even, it's similar to if you had a pessimistic thought of, nobody likes me, nobody likes me, nobody likes me. The more you say that, the worse you're going to feel. And likewise, in this case, you are engendering heroics. You're engendering altruism. So why do we all respond to movies? Why do we all respond to stories about heroes? It's because they're engendering some sort of wish for the greater good. And the four immeasurables is one of the most essential wishes for the greater good. And so it actually connects to the hero's journey and what it is that makes us want to be better. And if you do it enough, you will actually feel like you are beginning to become better. So please recite that prayer. Write it down. Read it over and over and over, and habituate those thoughts so that they begin to pop into your head even when you're not intending for them to pop into your head. And you will begin to lighten the load on your shoulders. You'll begin to feel like there is some lightness, some light, some radiance in you that may have not been there before. And then all you're doing is just elucidating and strengthening your natural capacity for heroism, for altruism. Now, let's get to the tarot part of the equation. And this does not apply. If you're doing the recitation, this does not apply to you. It's not something you have to be concerned about. It's not something you have to worry about. I'm talking for practitioners who have done this practice, 100,000 times, 200,000 times, 1,000,000 times, and have actually given rise to metta or bodhicitta, or an intense longing to relieve the suffering of others, intense longing to liberate others from suffering, an overwhelming sense of powerful, positive emotion that is seemingly supernatural, seemingly abnormal, in a good way. But anyways, so what does the tarot have to tell us about the four immeasurables? And what does the tarot have to do with Buddhism or the four immeasurables? I'm sorry for the camera, I'm just holding it, so my budget's a little tight. I had to sell many things to keep the rent going. So I had a real camera at one point, but this is just my iPad. Anyway, sorry for the digression. So first of all, we have the Fool. The Fool. And the Fool is the radiance of the sun. The Fool is the beauty of joy and freedom of love. So when we love, we feel fearless. So notice the figure is on the precipice of a cliff, and he's in icy mountains. This icy mountains being a dangerous territory, not some place that you would want to be. But the sun is shining without a cloud in the sky, and even though he carries a load, it does not weigh him down at all. He barely holds it with a single finger. And this is also evocative of Manjushri. So if you look at Manjushri holding the flaming sword, he holds it with the lightest and most gentle touch. A sword is something heavy, it's made out of metal, but is utter relaxation. And that's a function of love and joy. Joy makes things buoyant. It makes things float. It makes you lift your chest, lift your head. And again, you'll see that pictured. See, that's joy. The chest is open, the head is reaching towards the sky. When we feel joy, we often look up at the trees, we look up at the clouds, we take a deep breath. So this is one of two cards that represents the four measurables, this one being love and joy. So I'll come back to that in a second, but I want to get to the other card. So this is the High Priestess. And the High Priestess is full of water. Why is she full of water? And before we had the radiance of the sun, the fire energy, the masculine pride, the feeling of fullness. This is a tightness, the figure is enveloped, the figure is closed in a way, and she is sort of protected and cloistered is too strong a word, but she is closed. And also you see the instead of the sun, you see the moon is emphasized. So there are a lot of other details, related to cyclic related to cycles and revolutions and things that reoccur, astrology and such. She's also the knowledge holder. She's also holding the Torah, the crosses at her heart. The point that I want to emphasize is that she is compassion and equanimity. Now, compassion and equanimity, as I said, are sort of the downward thrust. They're the downward movement. And in order to understand this, we have to understand the nature of compassion, and the difference between love and compassion. Whereas love is a deep wanting for the happiness of others, compassion is grief on others' behalf. Now, grief is the great healing energy, and it's the first healing energy. It's the first gift that God gives to us, is the ability to cry. When we cry, we are able to let go. It's actually the only way that most human beings understand how to let go. And you shed the past. You let go of what it is that's harming you, and you do that through the water element, which is why she's covered in water. Now, why 2 cards? Well, it's to understand that there is a balance of forces, this upward and downward, yin and yang, positive, or I should say, this warm energy and this cold energy. So equanimity sort of obliterates sentimentality. And sentimentality is kind of what bonds us and brings us closer together. So ironically, equanimity, if not practiced skillfully and not balanced with joy, leads to sort of loneliness and nihilism. And I'm speaking more of the mistakes of conceptual equanimity than I am of sort of the wisdom of equanimity, which are far, far different and have to do with development and how profound these ideas have become. But talking about approaching these ideas as a new practitioner or someone who has a medium level of experience. So you have compassion, and compassion is grief for others. So it is the notion of, instead of feeling sad for yourself and shedding tears for yourself, you feel bad and sad for other people. And Shanideva explicitly says that this is the way to relieve other suffering. To have compassion for them is the karmic way of relieving the suffering of others, to have compassion for them. So to feel for them and to allow yourself to shed that pain, not hold on to that pain. And that's another thing. Compassion is not like being permanently bound to your suffering or others' suffering. It's about moving through suffering. So there's a lot of people that think they're very compassionate and they're more close to melodramatic, neurotic, depressed, that sort of thing. And that's actually why the cards are balanced. So the danger of emphasizing compassion and equanimity, or the cooling water energy, is that one can become overwhelmed with sadness. One can become overwhelmed with a sense of meaninglessness, which would be the danger of equanimity. If everything's the same, then nothing means nothing. So the composers of the tarot, or the message of Tauret, was to balance these two forces in harmony, or perhaps in opposition. So they're cooperative energies. So love and joy makes sense that they go together. They're both these positive, open energies, and equanimity and compassion are both sort of negative in a mathematical sense of taking away or releasing energies, and they have their dangers. So I already mentioned the dangers of the high priestess, whose message is grief is the goddess. Grief is the divine healing power. Grief is sacred, and it's not to be arrested. So this is a warning that if you feel to cry, then let yourself cry. Don't ever hold back tears, because this is your natural ability to heal. And you should allow that process to occur. And when it comes to the positive side, when we go back to the Fool, the danger should be obvious. The danger is pride. So, if one emphasizes love and joy, there's a sense of bliss, there's a sense of exaltation, there's a sense of being above it. And that's illustrated in the card. We're in the heavens, we're up in the clouds, we're up past the mountains. You know, everyone is, the dog is leaping upward on two legs, he's holding a flower, everything is about grandeur, right? And the danger is that you can, be the chosen one. You can feel like, oh, I feel so much love, I feel so much joy, I feel so much bliss. Everything is beautiful. Why can't anybody see what I see? And then the danger becomes pride. Why is pride so dangerous? Pride is the rationalization for all evil. The only thing you need to feel justified in doing harm to others is to feel that you are above them, and to feel that you are better than them, and that is the only justification you need. And that's why they say, like, dehumanizing people is a way to destroy them, is because if you feel above someone, if you feel better than someone, then there's this danger that you may not understand where they're coming from. If you feel like, oh, everybody should just love everybody, everybody should just, feel the beauty of life. Why are people so negative? Why are people so vicious? Why are people so petty? You're lacking compassion. You're not able to see the pain which motivates them. So, if you ever feel yourself being frustrated by others' behavior, the direct cause is that you are ignoring that person's pain, or you believe that that person's pain doesn't exist. You can't conceive of the pain that they're going through because it isn't overt in some way. But know that anger and pettiness and selfishness itself is pain. To feel selfishness is to feel scarcity. It's to feel like you don't have enough and you need more for yourself. So that person is very hungry in the emotional sense. To be angry, that's a reaction. That's the reaction of an animal who's been wounded and hurt and is lashing out. If someone is petty, it's because they're jaded. It's because they've been hurt and they feel like human beings are inherently bad, and so I should get them before they get me. These are all types of suffering. And so if you feel like upset because you feel you're a loving person, you're a good person, people shouldn't treat me this way, and you get to the point of feeling anger or resentment, pride is the issue, and the solution is compassion and equanimity. The solution is to understand the pain of others, and the solution is to see the equanimity, understand that you yourself have been in that position or could be in that position at some time in your life, and that you may indeed act the same way. And there's an extreme danger here of if you actually convince yourself that you could never be that way, or you could never act in that fashion, because fate or karma or just the natural mechanics of the universe have a very predictable habit of placing you in situations that you feel above or beyond or immune to. So if you don't want to experience those things, certainly don't allow yourself to give rise to the sense that you could never be that way. You could never feel that way. That's a very, that's what people call tempting fate. So that's the danger of emphasizing love and joy over compassion and equanimity. And now I will talk, I'm very sorry about the length of this video. Now I'll talk about the danger of emphasizing compassion and equanimity. So if you emphasize compassion, the world will begin to weigh on you. Everywhere you go, you'll see suffering. The beauty of the world, the magic of the world will begin to become gray. And you'll see, oh, this person is suffering, this person is suffering, this is suffering, that is suffering. Everything is dark, everything is brutal, everything is uncomfortable. There's no respite for sentient beings, and oh, it hurts me so much. If you do this, your capacity to do anything will be diminished, but especially your capacity to feel joy will be diminished. And it's absolutely explicit in right action that there must be joy in our practice. Always in our practice, there must be joy. You have to feel joyous about your prayers, your worship, your devotion, your reading of the text. Always there should be joy. If you're not feeling joy, you're not really getting the fullness of Buddhism. I was about to say you're not practicing Buddhism, but that's a bit unfair. People try. If you don't feel joy, well, keep trying. It's okay. But that's the danger is, there are some people in the Dharma that are just hysterically compassionate. They're so broken up about what this person is going through, what that person is going through. And it's likely that they're distracting themselves from their own pain and using other people's pain, which is unappealing. I don't know what the word is. My natural inclination is to say underhanded or manipulative, and I'm not sure that's actually right. But there's something strange going on there. Using other people's pain to sort of signal how caring you are is a bit vampiric in a way. You're kind of stealing something from somebody that isn't yours. And it's not proper. It's not proper to have compassion that is so individualistic, so emphasized on this individual or that individual, because then you've lost your equanimity, and you are very much in this dualistic and material mindset that the compassion must come from doing some sort of positive deed for this person or that person, and that's going to help them. And it's absolutely not going to help them in the long run, because if people are going through something, they're going through some sort of difficulty or hardship, you can help them. It's good to help them. But if you still remain attached and you still, you're going to bed thinking about it, waking up thinking about it, then you've created an affliction for yourself, and you're ignoring the fact that whatever they're going through is karmic, and that all karma is meant to align us. It's always a correction. So we get too much of one thing or not enough of another, and if we're following our heart and we're using our heart as our guide, then naturally we'll correct ourselves. the wish to rob that education from other people and to make them perfectly happy is absolutely unrealistic, because they need those experiences in order to grow spiritually. So in a way, it's unfair to completely alleviate somebody's suffering, you know. And it's absolutely emphasized uh, in Shanideva's Way of the Bodhisattva. He says, in what way, since the poor are always with us, should generosity be practiced? And he says, it's the wish to bestow everything on all beings, which is transcendent generosity. So it's supposed to be internal. Compassion is supposed to be internal. If you get stuck in the material world believing that we can change one thing or another to create this utopia or Buddha field or heaven or whatever you want, or just a better world, you're ignoring the reality. The poor are always with us. It's a natural function of karma. It's the cascade of causes and conditions. And it actually has to do with the mentality of that individual. And that's not something you can affect with generosity or kindness or anything like that. So yes, please be kind to people. Please be generous to people. But don't ever expect there to be any sort of great permanent relief, or just as a side note, don't expect them to be grateful, and be prepared for them to be resentful, especially if you overdo it. If you really try and take the reins of someone else's life, no matter how good your intentions are, they're likely to hate you in the end. So I hope I did somewhat of a justice of explaining the dangers of overemphasizing compassion and not balancing it with joy and love. When you balance compassion with joy or love, then even though you feel for people, you don't become overwhelmed. You don't become neurotic. You stay calm, because you still know that there's goodness in the world. You still know that there's beauty in the world. You still know that there's love in the world. And you still feel the buoyancy of the lifting energy, which is going to alleviate the heaviness of feeling grief for others. So you don't become overwhelmed. So the point of emphasizing joy and love is so that we don't become overwhelmed with the reality that life is suffering. And that's a great portion of why those two immeasurables exist. Now, lastly, if one gets wrapped up in equanimity, which is either to say, oh, all beings are equal, and wanting to be free from suffering and wanting happiness, which is a little more sane, but isn't the full picture, or equanimity in the sense that all phenomena, like everything that exists, is absolutely the same in its function, makeup, and essence, which is a little more accurate, but also can lead to some mental issues. So if you have an overemphasis in equanimity, then you can give rise to sort of a nihilistic attitude or a laissez-faire attitude of, everybody just goes through what they go through, so what? Or, why should I help this person when the whole world is suffering? Those sort of things. I'm certain I am not doing this particular subject justice. I'm not really preparing these talks at this point because my channel is so small. The more people that request things of me, the more that I will do a little more composition. But I wanted to share with you some of the wisdom of the tarot. So, and how it relates to Buddhism and how the two can be integrated. So the Fool, which is the number 0, and the High Priestess, which is the number 2, are the binary of non-existence and existence, or emptiness and compassion, or emptiness and awareness, depending on how you look at it, or emptiness. Emptiness and compassion is probably what I should say. They're really just the representation of all dualities in their most exalted form. And why do we, in the tarot, use the numbers 0 and 2 instead of 0 and 1, which is the traditional binary? The reason we do this is because we're talking about the binary of emptiness, which is a nothingness, an absence, absolute openness, pure potentiality, and 2, which is duality, subject, object, self and other. And that's why the 2 cards correlate, because otherwise we'd be talking about the Mage card, which is the 1 card. The 0 and the 1 in the tarot, and in sort of the spiritual sense, the 0 represents the pure potentiality of emptiness, and the 1 represents the all-encompassing spaciousness. So 1 being a singularity, a unity. So in the 0, nothing can actually manifest as reality, and in the 1, nothing can actually manifest in reality, because there's no relation between subject and object. There's no time, there's no change. In order for there to be a change, there has to be a cause and condition. There has to be a subject and object. You have to have a cause that affects a subject. So the binary in the tarot and the proper spiritual binary is 0 and 2. 1 is sort of manifest emptiness or spaciousness, and 0 is essentially the emptiness, the unmanifest infinite, where nothing can be said about it. So there is the darkness, which is the 0, and then there's the 1, which is, sort of the white light. And it's not until we get to the combination of darkness and light that we actually get contrast and individual objects and manifestation. And so the manifestation of the world, which is actually, in the Buddhist sense, ignorance, is represented by the number 2, and it's also why the High Priestess is representative of grief and compassion, because existence is suffering, life is suffering, and if you see that with some wisdom, if you see that from the sense of a useful spiritual tool, then life is compassion. So if you're being overwhelmed with the suffering of life, you are missing your opportunities for compassion. You're missing your opportunities to be a player, an active component of relieving that suffering. So when we say life is suffering, that means life is an infinite potential for compassion. And that's immeasurable compassion. Life is also full of beautiful things. The Buddhas are all pervasive, and their activity is all pervasive, and that is ultimately the greatest inspiration for joy, is the good deeds of others. That's what we call sympathetic joy, which is actually the joy that is emphasized in Buddhism, is sympathetic joy of seeing the happiness of others and thinking, oh, how wonderful, of seeing the compassionate and loving activity of others and thinking, oh, this is good, this is wonderful. And appreciating the natural love and compassion that beauty bestows upon us, the natural beauty bestows upon us. We see a beautiful tree or a beautiful mountain, and somehow our burden is lightened, and that is just the natural compassion of the Buddhas, the natural love of the Buddhas manifesting in our material world. I think that's all I'll say on the subject. I'm sure I missed a ton of things I wanted to say, but this is a very long video. I hope that I've been some help or inspiration to you, or at least sparked your curiosity in some way. This is Mama Rigse, Ganchak Namdral. Please like, subscribe, please comment, please tell other people about my channel. I would like for this to become a thing and not me just throwing messages in a bottle. So please tell other people about me. And I love you very much. Have a wonderful day. Or a good night, depending on what time you're watching this. Okay. Pray.